All right. So everybody come on back in the room. Gotta wait for that. I'm so sorry. I had to exit and come back in so I could tell um, Jason to come on. Hey, Don. All right, there we go. Jason King. Yes. Okay. Hi, Melly. Well.
What's up?
Hey now, Dr. King.
Hey now, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Of course, I'm more frenzied than I plan to be because I plan to be more prepared, but we all know how that works.
We can only
Um,
prepare as much as we can, and then the rest
yes,
we leave up to the spirit.
hallelujah. And as I said before, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers and Jason.
Yes.
We're waiting on people to come back in because I had to go live and then get off to try to make sure you was coming on with me and that because but
Come on in the
so
room. Come on in the room. Player warrior.
yes, come on. I'm a duplicate warrior, mamas. Come on in the room. You better come on in the room. Okay, so maybe like another couple seconds will allow people to come on in, y'all. Come on in, come on in, because I haven't been on that long, and I had to stop and start, and we had people join. So maybe I'll just start out with talking about this series really fast, and then we're just going to get to it because I know your time is valuable because you're doing all the things, Jason. I started this series, well, definitely with the prodding of a couple people, Nicholas Catramboni, one of my students from NYU, and Shonda Clinton, George Clinton's granddaughter, one of my best friends, and many others probably, but so basically, this is an opportunity for me to talk to all the wonderful people that I've worked with of all ranges of disciplines, and to also, not only interview or get interviewed, but to dialogue and to talk. And when I do these interviews where I ask someone to interview me, it's like I said in my caption, an opportunity to tell the story and talk about stuff and answer questions without feeling the pressures of pitfalls and all of that, and giving away trade secrets and the like. Okay, 2 seconds. This will also allow people to come in the room. I gotta answer my door. I'll be right back.
Okay, we're now looking at Kendra's wall. I see D'Angelo flowers. Okay, let's go say hey to people while we wait for Kendra. What's up, Marlon? Oh, nice to see some friends on here.
Okie dokie. And we are back. There we go.
Good.
Woo! Okay, now we're really in the room. Everybody else should be by now. So I'm going to start with asking Dr. King to tell us a little bit about himself, because you all should know the power and the force who's asking me questions. And I'm going to do another interview on another episode, if he has time, of him. So, but to start with, I don't even know where to start. I think something really monumental, because education is everlasting, learning is everlasting. Um, why don't you tell us about what you did at Tisch University at NYU?
Okay. Sure. First of all, I'm just so happy to be here. It's such a. I'm happy to see you. You look good in quarantine.
Thank you. You too.
Isolation. All right. You got that isolation glow. And it's such a weird and strange time, first of all, but I'm glad to be having this conversation just because of all the people passing this weekend. Andre Harrell, Betty Wright today, Little
Oh
Richard.
my God, I didn't know.
Betty Wright, yeah, we should talk about Betty. It's deep. It's deep.
Who else did you say?
Ty, the rapper from UK, Little
Yes.
Richard, Andre Harrell. It's just like it's a, and that's just this week. It's like a strange time. So I'm just happy to be talking to somebody I consider to be one of the most galvanizing forces in R&B music, black music, and we've never really had a conversation like this before. So even just like sitting down and talking, so why not do it in front of a bunch of people? That sounds good to me. But just really briefly, my background. So I would describe myself as a scholar. I have 3 titles at NYU: Associate Professor at the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at Tisch School of the Arts, NYU, which is also where Kendra teaches. I have been professor there for a really long time, like just think a couple presidents ago. And I'm also Director of Global Studies, so that means I run global programs for the Clive Davis Institute. So we set up music programs in different places in the world. So I've set up like Abu Dhabi, and we have a program in Berlin. We have a class in Havana. I was in Singapore, that kind of thing. And then I'm also Director of Writing, History, and Emergent Media Studies. So that's like music journalism, music writing, history. I've been there since we started the program, 2001, around that time, when I was 2 years old. And also outside of that, I'm a journalist, write for NPR and for Pitchfork and for Slate and Red Bull Music Academy, a whole bunch of publications for a long time. Used to be with Vibe, Village Voice. And I'm a musician, so keyboards, a little bit of keyboards, produce, write, lots of stuff like that. And worked in a lot of different capacities, so doing a lot of stuff in the music business, A&R, that sort of thing, and also a lot of legal work. So I've done projects with Jay-Z and Kanye West and Gaga and Madonna, and the list goes on and on. But I guess in this capacity, I'm curious. I have questions for you, so I don't even want to talk about it.
Okay, guys, as you can see, the list goes on and on. That's hashtag the list goes on and on. That's the depth. If we were to look Jason King up in a person dictionary, that's what we will find. And so also, and I wanted to ask, what is the name again of your group and or musical persona rock star situation?
Oh, it's called Company Freak. So
Company Freak.
Yeah, it's a dance music band. I don't know if anyone's on from Company Freak, but it's basically a kind of loose collection of what I consider to be amazing talents, amazing vocalists, amazing musicians, harkening back to the sound of like late 1970s New York, when it's sophisticated and string arrangements and Chic and D-Train and so on, but also featuring members from groups like Chic and D-Train in the group, as well as younger musicians. And we're on hiatus right now. I took some time to work on some projects that I wanted to do for myself, and then getting back to some music. But I spent the last year recording in Morocco. I was in Nigeria, a bunch of places, and so kind of excited about some new stuff that's happening.
Oh yeah, and so where can they follow Company Freak?
You can find all our stuff on Spotify. It's also on Apple Music, all the digital sites.
Okay, wonderful. And then before we begin, I just want to say how I very initially encountered Jason King, Dr. Jason King, is when we released Black Messiah and we were doing those early shows. I couldn't remember if it was a review of the show or of the album, but you had done a piece in the journalism world on it. And I remember, Dee was very selective about what he could read or take in. And this was one of those articles that not only did he read aloud and liked, but we both loved it. And so forever from there, I like Jason King has been implanted in my consciousness. Before I would encounter Begin at NYU, shout out to Callie Green for linking me up to that situation. And yeah, so here we go. Here we go, everybody. Oh, I shouldn't be holding up arms too much. Ain't shaved them. So, and happy Mother's Day, Bobby, if somehow you decided to tune in. Okay, here we go, Jason. I'm ready. Let her rip.
All right. Well, I just want to say, I didn't even know that story. I just remember I'd done a bunch of writing on D'Angelo. I'd done liner notes for the reissue of Voodoo. And when Black Messiah was coming out, I did a few pieces on him, one for Slate. And then I did this piece for NPR. And I think I talked about you there. And I think somehow we maybe met on Facebook. But we didn't even meet in person until maybe a couple months later, right? And then there was the whole NYU thing. So it's interesting. But we have a lot of mutual people that we know, I think, people who worked on Black by George Clinton, whatever. So it's kind of like it all felt like I knew you forever the minute that I met you. So,
Exactly.
all right, so I do have questions for you, but the first thing I want to do is just I want to put some context around why people should be actually tuning in and like paying attention to you, and why I never do this. I never come on Instagram live. I was texting Kendra
Yay!
before. I was like,
Thank
what
you.
is
I
this?
want to.
No, this is like for me, like I don't do this, but I do it for you. And here's why. I think you're such an interesting figure to me in terms of the history of R&B, the history of pop music, popular music in general. Partly because you've worked with, I think, two icons in particular who are so definitive to the history of that music of the last like 40, 40 plus years, and that's George Clinton and D'Angelo. And the fact that you are like a kind of musical glue between those figures is something that we have to like think about, talk about, and figure that out, because I think that's really important. I also, I want to shout out the fact that you're one of the few female collaborators to work with D'Angelo. At the, I think if maybe only at the level of songwriting. I could be wrong about that. As
Besides
far
Angie, I guess. Yeah,
as
one of the
Angie,
few. Yes.
Angie, I don't want
That's
to. I don't want to dismiss Angie for sure. And I think, and that's fascinating. And I think you um, helped him put together one of the most defining albums of the last decade, which is Black Messiah. And I think your contribution has been recognized, but it needs to be recognized even more because it's like 8 of the 12 tracks. You know, you're co-writer on it. Won a Grammy, Real Love, Real Love. R&B
and
album,
Black Messiah.
and for Black Messiah is the whole album itself. But I've always thought of you, as what I call a journeywoman. So in the context of R&B, there's all these people who are the superstars, the household names that everybody knows, first name only, the Patty, the Shaka, the Teddy, the Luther. And then there's journey people. There are people who traverse the industry in this really interesting way where they work on a lot of different projects and they gain all of this amazing historical experience by way of working on these projects, but they may not be as recognized. And one of the things that being a journey person allows you to do is to gain a certain kind of freedom from stricture, freedom from being sort of controlled by the machinations of the industry. And I'm really fascinated by the whole world of journey people in the music industry. And I think of you as one of those people. I also would put you in the context of people like Minnie Riperton, Cyrita, Belita Woods, who we'll talk about, Lynn,
Thank.
Asha Putley, Tata Vega, Joy, Khalees, Nika Costa. There's like a whole bunch of people who've done really incredible work, and I think of you in that way. I also think of you in a way that I know Prince used to always say he wanted his artists to be emancipated. And he wanted to work with artists he considered to be emancipated. And I've never talked to you about this, but I consider you to be an emancipated artist in the sense that you seem to be extremely musically free. And that's a very, very difficult place for a lot of people to get to. And you seem to be there. So I'd love to explore that. I also think you matter so much because you're an experimentalist in the context of the R&B tradition. Your music is drifty and spacey and cosmic and atmospheric, and it's sophisticated and complicated in terms of the jazz chords and so on. I was just listening to the bridge on Sweeta, and I was like, wow, Kendra, you just like go. And I think your debut album, the full debut album, 2016, self-titled, is one of those really underrated and overlooked R&B albums that everybody needs to get. And I put it in the context of the Sarahs and the Pointer Sisters and the Ericas. It's like a mix and a melange of all those different styles. And so that's why I'm here, because I want to talk to you more about that and like put some shine on who you are and what you do.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's so overwhelming. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.
So let me ask you about Tallahassee. So tell me about Florida and tell me why and how Florida factored into your creativity and your musicality. You could have come from anywhere. You came from Tallahassee. How did it impact your music?
Oh wow, that's a wonderful and very perfect question. I lovingly refer to Tallahassee as Fern Gully, because Tallahassee and many parts of Florida, as I learned when I was a kid in one of our classes, it was one of, I guess, the last developed states or something, or that they would actually like, you know, turn into something besides the rainforest and all that sort of stuff, or that the swamp and all of that. But it's it's still very, it's so natural. Where I'm from is the capital. Tallahassee is the capital. So there are three colleges there, Florida State University, FAMU, and then Tallahassee Community College, which was at one time larger than FAMU. So three really big institutions, legislature going on. Yet it still has such a small town vibe, because even when you're flying over it, at least for a while till they started doing more construction and stuff, you couldn't even see it for the trees, literally. And so I remembered when I was moving from Tallahassee, like thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, I got to get out of here because I would never leave. I mean, look, the trees that are so green, they look like they're breathing, you know, and the sun is always shining. I'm sure my complexion and my hair and everything are better when I'm there. But also about Florida, you know, I grew up going on field trips through the swamps. You know, Spanish moss is a regularity for me. Endless flowers, because even my parents' house, my dad still lives in Tallahassee. My dad and my other Mama Pookie. Hi, Mama Pookie, although I know she's not online. And our house, the what would you call it? The gate around our house is actually a big long string of azalea bushes, like, you know, camellias and azaleas and honeysuckles, and I think they may be called mimosas. They're little fuzzy pink flowers. I always called them pink fuzzies when I was a little girl. Dogwoods, you know, all that stuff. Butterflies everywhere, you know. It's so natural, and that has everything, and the sunshine, and that, even though my parents are not from Florida, they both somehow found themselves there. My dad is originally from New York, and he moved to Northern California when he was 11, and my mom is from Mississippi. And so I and my brother are really the only people in our family from Florida. So also, I can drive to the beach in 2 hours. I can go to the river in about 3 and get in the inner tube and roll down it. Despite the fact that Tallahassee is so, you know, floral and all these things, and yet also like a capital, what I found out as I grew up was that there was all this culture hiding in Tallahassee. I mean, thanks to Nia and Ed Love, shout out to Nia Love if she's anywhere around here. They they really helped bring African culture and, well, in dance, and mainly through dance. I guess I'm probably shortchanging it. And Nia was my first African dance teacher, Onye Ozuzu, who may be on here too as well. But anyway, all that to say, there were factions of there were Khan houses and Ifa or Risha houses in Tallahassee already. When I started traveling abroad, I found out that we've done so much work to bring so many people from different parts of Africa to teach us dance and drum and music, to reconnect us, that there was a very rich wealth of that culture there. So that it also yielded me that, despite not being a metropolitan place. So from, Southern Baptist, missionary Baptist churches as well, that are off in the hood behind FAMU, growing up in that, or, it's earthy, it's floral, it's soulful. There's all kinds of stuff you find living in the South and growing up in the South, that because so many of our ancestors are in the soil by all sorts of ways, there's a reverberation. And so I'm quite proud to be a Florida girl, because there are so many elements. It's so magical and mystical, and specifically in Tallahassee. So that shaped me in all those ways, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And so then, and by the way, we got a lot of friends online saying, hey, so just hey, everybody.
Hey, everybody, because some of my best friends, I don't want to interrupt the...
Interrupt the flow. So Florida A&M, you went, you were a jazz studies major, yeah? Tell me about that experience. Tell me what you think you've gained in terms of skills there.
Okay, well, first I want to say that I grew up on FAMU's campus because my father was a professor there. He was a math professor there. My mother was an English professor there. Then even after they divorced and remarried, my other mom was a career counselor there. So I spent all my years growing up at FAMU, and then when I went to high school, when I came and I had to leave Tallahassee and live with my mother, I and come back to visit. As a high schooler, I was seeing it differently. It was like it looked like literally a different world, the show. We had to set, all that. So what did I learn there? Well, I learned so much, especially because I started out at volleying back and forth between being a math major and a chemistry major, because I was a very practical child and didn't think that you could do music for a living, or the chances were slim if you weren't discovered. And so what I learned there was, of course, a lot of information, but more importantly, that's where I met very early, like my first summer after my first year at school, at a coffee shop that I believe was called Epitome, but I might have it wrong, where they were doing a jazz jam session, and like a poetry reading, like spoken word, because that was really big right before Love Jones came out. And I met Whitney Russell, who was a trumpet player, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's real musicians. They exist. And so I was like, can I sing a song with you guys? And they
But
were like,
wait,
what you want to do?
at this time you were a math major, so you
I
weren't
was a
even
math
thinking,
major.
like, why weren't you thinking of a music career at that time?
Because even though my parents were so awesome at saying, hey, you can do whatever you want, they also were quite realistic in saying, like, well, these are the odds. And for me, like I said, I was way more practical and an old lady than I am now. It's kind of the reverse happened to me. I was very old when I was young, and now I want to be all young. But like, I was like, it doesn't look probable. I'll build a studio in the back of my beautiful new house that I get with a degree, and my husband will just have to put up with me wanting to make music all the time or whatever. But what was very important about what I learned there is and it's not there, it was what was parallel to there. It was people that were in either programs or not, that were on that bandstand that night, that when I sang Lullaby of Birdland, they were like, oh, that's not Summertime or My Funny Valentine. That's some shit. So the bass player, Greg Williams, gave me a mixtape the next time I came, of all these wonderful other artists I didn't know about, like Betty Carter and maybe a couple others, because I already knew Dinah Washington, Nancy Wilson, Sarah Vaughan were my favorites at this point. But that was key, for them to unlock that world. And then Whitney Russell ran down on me and was like, hey, do you also sing Charade and smooth jazz and all that? Because he said later he saw money, but he groomed me though. And so he was teaching me how to break down and put up sets, all the things, like, you get respect if you know what key you do something in before you step to the players with it, or if you can go, transpose your chart, or like endless, like, copying fake books and charts and real books that he would give me. And then also we would go to FSU's library, because unfortunately, HBCUs funding, whatever, we didn't have those resources, but our card could get us in. So we would get boxes, and it was under his leading, boxes. We choose an artist and check out boxes of CDs. Maybe it'd be Freddie Hubbard this week, Jimmy Heath the next week, and make jazz mixtapes. Now, simultaneously, he was roommates with a funk musician who also was like, oh, wait a minute, you want to be in our band? And I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. And so I joined the funk band, Smoke, and that's where I was covering the jazz and all the stuff I already was, but in that funk place that I didn't know nothing about. Because, like, my parents had a lot of music. We had Ohio Players, EWF, and everything, but nobody had Funkadelic. And so him being so obsessed, he was Mike Patterson. He was so obsessed, and still is. Mike P is what we call him. With Funkadelic and P-Funk and George Clinton, And then also with turning me into a hodgepodge of Mavis, Shaka, Tina, and Belita Woods.
When you say turning you into, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. This industry and world is very much a man's world. So bless his heart, even though he's one of my bestest friend, big brother, and mentor. People encounter you and they're like, I'm gonna make you a star. I'm gonna turn you into this, or I'm gonna use my influence, because you look
Stars.
like you could. Yeah, so which I thought was, I still laugh at it lovingly because by way of him thinking he was going to turn me into that machine, he imparted a lot of that in. And so it was there that besides all of once I switched over to a jazz studies major, because that's why I mentioned these people, because this was my education that was happening outside of the direct individual study that I was doing with the chemistry and the labs and the everything. And was that one day, Whitney was like, hey, you want to do music. You do a lot of different things really well. He was like, but if you do everything will just get 20%. It's like you got to choose one or two to kind of lock down on so they could really get the focus, Virgo. And so, he was like, so that was something where at that point, excuse me, I had been invited to come and join the Urban Bushwomen Institute, which encompasses all talents. And when I did a gig one night and all the Urban Bushwomen and all the dancers in the Institute came to my gig, I realized and this all happened during that education, they're the dancers and I'm the singer, I love this that much that I would go the whole road. Dance, it seemed like there would be points where I would get lazy, that it couldn't be a whole thing. Anyway, moving right along. So that was going on simultaneously. And he said, then further to that point, why don't you just make your degree or in order to live with music all day long, why don't you switch your degree to that so that you can satisfy getting the piece of paper for your people, but you can spend all day studying this, and through that program, I mean, though we didn't have the resources like of the CDs we were checking out, we had the teachers though. We had the swinging heart of it, of the music thing, and also by way of a lot of the teachers being descendants or from the culture that created the art form. And that's no diss, to anyone else. It's just that, hey, if it's in your genes, there's going to be that sensibility. And so that's what I really learned from jazz. That Longinu Parsons, shout out to Lindsay Sargent, Dr. Jeffrey Horn, and Dr. Shirley. Oh Lord, all of a sudden I forgot anyways, that will come back to, I can't believe I would forget my voice teacher's name. But so that's also when I started vocal studios, jazz improv classes, and learned even more how to become a musician, and that's also, we'll get there. But it was also during that time that George Clinton moved to Tallahassee. While I was still in school, all this was going on.
Okay, so you had been in groups like Smoke, Fish and Grits was another group.
Yes,
so
and Concept, which is a real, and Fish and Grits and Concept. Smoke was a beautiful underground brand new heavy type of thing, but Fish and Grits was amazing too. We blew up Tallahassee, but I'd really like to say Concept was the band that got it, because and that was started by John Tony, aka Theory Music. And we really, there are people that still will come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I remember you from Concept. So yes, I was doing all those things.
Okay, we need, first of all, two things. One, we need photos of you in the chemistry lab, because that's going to be some deep photos that I need to see right now. And I want to see a couple math equations. And then second, we got to hear some of that music. I don't know how much of it is available anymore, but it will be interesting to really dig deeper into that music at some point and play some of that stuff. I don't know how many people have heard your early band stuff prior to people.
Well, here's what's funny. We didn't really, none of these bands really did any recordings. And a lot of in Concept, we did a lot of covers. That's why last night when I was on the Erica and Jill versus, it was just like, oh my gosh, I used to cover that. 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 Yeah. So
Okay.
there's not a whole lot of, and that it was during that time, Jason. I'm glad you asked about that. That I really began writing because I didn't trust myself. There's so many things I threw out in the trash before I got used to what it felt like to show people that it could have been good even.
Yeah.
And so I wrote my first song with Fish and Grits.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
all right. So now let's go to George Clinton.
Yep.
So you met him. He'd moved to Florida. I think this is still George with the hair era.
Yes, still hair, George.
Could not miss the hair. If you saw George Clinton at that time, you knew it was him. There was no chance you were mistaken it was something else. So you met him. Tell me about that meeting and how that led to you joining P-Funk.
All right. Wow. Well, that's a bit of a long road, but we can shorten it. First of all, on the hair. Yeah, it's really hard to not know who that is when it's walking around Tallahassee. I mean, honestly, the first time I saw him in an airport, I was like, nah, that's somebody dressing up to be like him. There's no freaking way, but who would go through all that trouble? Many people, you'd be surprised. There's one of them that used to come to our shows all the time. But anyway, okay, so Mike P, going back to Michael Patterson, he was so obsessed with the band and in the process of this got me obsessed because at first I didn't see why he was. A lot of my the pinnacles of my like musical thought, like I did not get to at first. It was almost like a backward sourcing. Like first, I love D and his music, and he was my generation. Then I get to college, and that was another thing about FAMU was meeting all this and learning about the Black hippie or like those people that don't do the everything that everybody does. That was always me, but just didn't fit in, until I could get to college and see people wrapping their hair and doing this and that, aka through Orches's Contemporary Dance Theater, which was the dance company that I was in. So like when Prince came to town, I didn't know what the big deal was. I didn't know that these people source the people that I love, and I'd not ever heard the inner albums. So just to briefly, before I met George, as I was meeting him or about to, and Michael was obsessed with them, we were traveling around in smoke, actually doing certain things. Like he was already pushing me to do Belita features. And so as a result, then, finally we took one road trip and he started playing each song off of Let's Take It to the Stage. And I was like, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? Who's that?
So
And
let's take the
then
stage.
that's when
That's P-Funk's 1975 album, one of their best, most cohesive records. Just so everyone knows. Yeah.
yes, Funkadelic. And so that's when I was like, oh. And the same had happened with Prince because it took my boyfriend, Mr. Corey Brown, at the time, to make me mixtapes and to show me, and all my crew, in Orches's Contemporary Dance Theater, to show me how amazing it was. And then, so every time I got introduced to anybody's inner album, I fell down a black hole and I didn't know nobody else. So that happened with Prince. So now I was already in love with D and Prince, and here comes Funkadelic through Mike P. And now I see why. Now I get it. Then I start listening to One Nation Under a Groove, Hardcore Jollies, all this stuff. And so it's at this point that I get it, and I get why somehow him connecting with George and being able to engineer for him at his studio way out there in the sticks in Monticello, 20 miles outside of Tallahassee, and I do mean off in the country, like no lights, no nothing out there. Like he started engineering for him, and probably like within a year, 6 months or so, he'd find me, like he took me out there, and at that point I had become a fan by that point. So when I first met George, I drove my little 85 Toyota Corolla all the way out to the sticks. I didn't have a radio, so I had to play a big boom box to put my headphones in. And I'd come up in the studio because it's in an old house, and the studio's in like a little weird lofty situation inside of the house. And it's an old house now. Everything about this was like down home. And so I walked in and I remember thinking, the Wild George that we all see, this like looks so animated and all these things. Like I was expecting maybe just some wild crate, but I walked in and he was the coolest dude in the room. Like, like one of them, like like gangster dudes just don't say nothing ever, and just almost you will not like to interrupt their coolness because they're so quiet, solid, and and really it was just like I was quiet and just glad I could be in the room. It took a couple of those instances. I would be going out to the studio when they weren't there. They toured so much. So meeting him, what I discovered was that, oh, not only is he really cool, and that's a persona that he kind of lives up to and that he purposely does because he enjoys it. It's also like he's also the most like even and solid person in the room. And at that time, he was still doing the do, so even with that going on, he was still the most like, it's like at that fatherly energy of you feel safe, you feel taken care of, you feel like, you're sitting at a well of knowledge and spirit and, transcendence.
He's really grounded. He's really down to earth. I think people don't.
Extremely. Yeah. No matter what, I mean, he likes to fish and he likes to paint and he likes to incessantly write and create. Those are his things. And so, honestly, at first, I was really just somebody coming around just to be around. So eventually, he'd be like, "Come on, you could sing this or whatever," and so I would always feel like, yeah, anything I've done, he ain't blown away by. So, this isn't any longer like any sort of, oh, I get put on or discovered. Or it was just like, I just want to be around greatness and learn from it. So there came a point where he had started teaching me so much character singing, like move out of that pretty space and all that stuff. We know you can do that. Try this, like do it a little more nasally or do it like this or do it like that. And quite frankly, now that I'm talking about it, like not to go off on too many streams of consciousness or tangents, but honestly, that helped me find my voice because there was so much more to me and my voice that I hadn't, it wasn't even that I didn't think there was much to it. As when I hit puberty, my voice was changing so much and it was coming all raspy and all these things that I'd never known, was a good thing till Lauryn Hill came out with her, or sang for us for the first time for real during Sister Act. But it was like, finding my voice was a hard thing to do. I did so much mimicking as well. But yet everybody would tell me my voice was so unique, So anyway, so with him working on that, it was funny also to hit a point where he wanted me to sing pretty. And as a producer, he couldn't get it out of me. And it was like, and then when I finally did it, I was like, that's all you wanted to be? You wanted me to do what I was before you changed me. And you forgot just to say to do what you do, And then, but it took a whole year, Jason, before, at least a whole year, maybe two, before like there was any like connect in terms of, let's do something with this girl. I was just going, I'd be scraping together gas money, to go out there, putting together change or just to work on stuff. So if they came back, because other members of the band come too, that I could, that I, have something to show for myself. And during a spring break, I even worked every day, eat, cut, sleep with his son Tracy Lewis, who is a brilliant genius. And truth be told, George has totally like used some of his lyrics before, but not that he's not his own well, but that's how much of a well Tracy is. So that's what that was like, beginning up into that.
And I'm sure people watching know this, but Parliament Funkadelic, one of the great soul and funk bands. George Clinton, one of the great inventors of funk music, alongside James Brown and Curtis Mayfield and Sly from Sly and the Family Stone. But the P-Funk experience is a very complex one. It's a collective. It's an ensemble of individual talents who all kind of work together and separately, and it's like it's a rich tapestry of talents. And the onstage experience for anyone who hasn't seen it is also really complex, and there's lots of people moving and many voices. It's all about multiplicity and about spectacle and, of course, the mothership and all that stuff. So tell me, besides learning from George Clinton about different kinds of ways of singing, because he was basically producing you for a while before you actually, like, he was figuring out how to produce you and how to bring you in. tell me about the experience being with P-Funk. What does that do to a singer? How do you learn? How do you think about performance differently, having now been through that crucible of P-Funk?
Oh my gosh. Oh my word. Well, let's start with another thing that made me fall in love with funk is that, like you said, it's like an undiluted fusion. Every element that there is there uncut. And that's what made me be turned out as a musician and as a musical mind aspiring to be all lofty was that, oh, if any person, nobody can say this isn't intelligent. Nobody can say that this isn't complex and deep and exquisite, because for all that I've learned about music, for all that I knew and loved about music, even in the theoretical sense, you can find it all there and at exquisitely high levels. Like, these people are performing at prodigy levels, every last one of them. And I agree, this is not a group of anybody background. This is what's so beautiful, is it's a group of leads. Everybody is lead. Everybody's doing it to the point where it becomes hard for George to wrangle.
Every star.
Everybody is a star. Everybody's got a little light under the sun, you know. And so with that, as a result, and that's why I think after a while he called it the P-Funk All-Stars, was because these dudes, first of all, and the ladies, they were so good at what they did, and they must have had shed hyper hard at some point in their life. It did not matter the influence under which anybody was under. Sometimes I would be amazed that Muggs is shredding because I know how messed up they are, you know. And the other thing is, they were wild and fun and wilder than the wildest young person. So it was like, even though I was running around with people that were like 20 and 30 years older than me, it still felt like I was like a youngin' in the 70s. And so what I also would learn is textures and why some special voicings of chords. And with someone like George, who thinks in high level music theory, like his natural starting point is high level theory. But you have all these different people that, if they're not teaching me sounds or literally showing me chords on the guitar, but if they're not teaching me sounds or textures or stylization, it would be okay, I got lost because there's so much that I learned. It might be notes, it might be presence. There's also performance, because before I came to P-Funk, there did at least exist at one time a culture of hyper practice, and preparation. Because if you're landing motherships and stuff, you can't be all out of place. They actually had voice rehearsal sessions, rehearsal. But by the time I came to them, they was doing all this for so long, and whatever we had come into, it was just like, it would look like a free-for-all, but it's not quite. And when I came in, I had to go get up under people, and I had to go study. And it wasn't just knowing the songs, it was knowing the arrangements, it was knowing the tendencies, it was knowing, and I was doing that while still at school, doing really hard theory work and taking exams that, thank God, Dr. Jeffrey Horn would make especially for me, so I could still make it. But it was it. But to see how that, even without the intuitiveness that had to come into play to be a part of this historical situation, because I didn't want to drop the ball. I couldn't just come up in there willy-nilly with what I was coming up in. So I also learned how you can create a world and an atmosphere without props and without that stuff, because we also had clipedelic narrating, kind of narrating the whole thing, reiterating all of the dialogue or the monologues and the soliloquies that we all know George for, in between stuff, and introducing people. So I learned, we'd have to dedicate a whole nother thing to what I learned.
But the thing that's interesting about that is it's rehearsed, but it's spontaneous, or it's rehearsed so that it can be spontaneous.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Which is like Yeah.
we would rock on. I think also what helps that is that George will rock with a certain set of medleys, and like, you know, where he may flip it up according to what the crowd feels like. That was actually one of my complaints after a while, honestly, because we have such a vast catalog. That was like, oh my gosh, why can't we do this one and that one? And it would be like, nah, because Boogie played bass on that and his fingers is weak now, or he played too much guitar, so he ain't gonna, you know, or this or and things. So like we couldn't do certain songs because he was very particular about certain personnel being on stuff, you know. But yeah, so it was just a wealth.
All right, so tell me about Belita Woods, because Belita is one of your influences. And for those who don't know, Belita was lead singer of a group called Brainstorm. And Brainstorm, I think they were around from like 1976 to 1980. They were signed to Taboo Records, which is Clarence Avant's.
Yes.
And Brainstorm released one of my favorite jams of all time, Lovin' Is Really My Game.
Oh!
A band has actually performed, which is like rockets out of your speakers at the speed of light and just does not stop. It's been covered by a lot of different artists, Sylvester included. But Lovin' Is Really My Game is one of those hard, tricky songs to sing. It's a lot of lyrics, but it's funky as hell. It's amazing. So she's probably most known for that, but then Brainstorm did an album called Journey to Light, which is 78, I think. And it's an underrated, fantastic record, really heavy on the arrangements, super, super sophisticated. But yeah, I know that you cite that as one of your favorite records. And also Belita, who's in the group with you, was a mentor in some ways. So just briefly tell me about her and how she impacted the work that you do.
Yes. Well, how she came into my life yet again was because Michael Patterson would just insist over and over again on me, you know, singing her features. And at first I was like, wow, she has such a different voice. Like, wow, you know, there's the first person that I could hear, you know, besides maybe like a Lauryn Hill or something like that got that voice, like that different thing. And so I slowly fell in love with her. So by the time I was able to meet her, I was very, very, very nervous. And she was so sweet, and she let me you know, she was like, well, sing something for me, baby, you know. And I was like, oh my God. And so I sang her this song, and she was like, oh wow, you know. And the thing is with Belita, you know, she's one of my pinnacles for sure. Ironically, she's the only female in terms of, and I should say those are Stevie Wonder, Prince, P-Funk, D'Angelo, and of course Belita Woods. And so, okay, she was also a jazz singer. And so what I learned from Belita, there were a few things she would say, but she was like, you know, sometimes when you're writing, you want to write it like a conversation. You know, it like the phrasing and everything, it's got to feel natural. Like, is this, and then, you know, remembering songs even, it's like, well, what was the intent? What was the thing here? You can't teach how she sounds and what she does. You can only mimic it. But she also taught me just so many things. But there was this level of, she was so wild and yet so motherly and so still kind of following the book. So watching her take on, you know, her possession when she performed. I mean, she got 2 notes in her range. She just always pulled from the earth and the ethers, you know. And she told me that I was her musical soulmate. Woo! I'm so sorry.
Wow, Steve.
But what she taught me was like, look, purity, like without pretense. Like, if you only got 2 notes in your range, you sang from your heart. That's what's going to make it sound good, you know. And just her aura, just the way she would sweep across the stage, like not even like a queen or like, but like a god, you know, or a spirit. So yes, loving is really my game.
I hear a recording in your future of that.
Yes, or I'll be doing others too, Jason. Like if you ever need to cry from Journey to the Light, and actually, before we leave off of the Belita subject, there's a song that she never released that she cut with Brainstorm. So 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 beautiful. It's called "Music Is Love," and oh, and I'll just sing one line. Love, music is love, music is lights, music is wine, music is me, music is you. And so I actually had showed it to D, and he wanted to make a new version because she didn't get to release it because she had issues, I guess, with her co-creator. And so we were going to, try to recreate it for her, or, in her honor. And I mean, it's still not too late to do that, even though she's not here. That's the one last thing I'll say. And, Mother's Day, may she rise in power. Is that I really wished I was agonizing over writing her the perfect song because she asked me to, and I never did before she passed. But that's okay. She'll just have to sing it through me. That's all.
And it's never too late to tribute somebody. Maybe you can do I don't know, a brainstorm project of some sort in the
Oh
future.
yes. Oh yes.
So George Clinton, you did a production deal with him, right? There was an album from the early 2000s, like 2003, that you worked on. Didn't come out till a bit later. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to tell that story. I mean, I think we can skip past some of that because I think it led to, it wasn't the end of your career. It led to other stuff that was happening.
Yes.
You moved to New York in like 2009. Is that right?
Yes.
2009. Okay. And then lots of stuff
Lots of
happening
stuff.
for you. But let's jump a little bit further, just in the interest of time, and let's talk about D'Angelo because it's such a big and important aspect of your career. So, when did you start the process of working? How did you get involved with Black Messiah, and when did you start the process of working on the album?
Okay. I met him thanks to George's daughter, Barbarella Bishop, making sure it was cool that I had his number. So I called him the day before Obama was elected the first time, while I was in an airport on a layover going to Huntsville, Alabama to cut things like Promise to Stay Here and Understand It and things off the Kendra Foster album. And because I had his number for a couple months and only got up the nerve. So, I called him and I was like, hello, may I speak to D'Angelo? I didn't know his real name, even though I was a mega fan. I didn't think I could call him D like everybody else around me did because I didn't know him like that. And so that's led to basically, we talked preliminary, which it's amazing that he answered an 850 number. I mean, let's just be for real. Like, we all know he's a recluse. He is the recluse that we think he is, absolutely. And just, it's incredible. That's how I know it was, I guess, ordained or whatever. But so we decided after I sent him a sample of my work, that I'd actually created with the dude who co-wrote "I'm Too Sexy." He and a picture, because there's only 50 of us in the band, so it's like, this me. It turned out that I guess he'd already seen me before, because he was like, oh, I thought that was you. He was like, I'd seen you before because I was about to walk out of the room, for a snack or whatever, while watching P-Funk at the Montreux Festival while I was on BET or whatever. And so when he said he saw me, it was like he saw a similar sensibility, definitely a trace of influence. And he had been, looking for me or whatever, but, I'd been on his radar at least, because it's not so hard to find me, but, so especially when I was rolled around with George and them all that time, but it's okay. He found me at this point. Now, at that time I was still living in Tallahassee and he was still in VA. And so we were both off in the woods trying to figure out when we were going to meet. He was changing up management. I was on the road all the time. So every time we scheduled something, we canceled it. So it was like a whole year but at least in the meantime, we talk about music. We'd really get to know what's going on in our musical minds. And I mean, he wasn't going to send me nothing. At the very end, once I moved to New York, he played me a couple things, what would now be The Door. Or no, one of the mothers, maybe it is The Door, or one of the mother songs. But and on the phone, and then I made it here in 2009 and he made it January 2010 and moved to New York. So when he got here, as soon as he got here, that was the first time we would meet in the flesh, you know, and met at the studio. And that's when, and that was 2010, just at the brink. But I would say we were working on that album since we met, really, because all of the musical talks, all of the exchanges, all the, hey, have you ever heard of this? I mean, he put me on, honestly, to Dave Bowie, like the early stuff, not the stuff I grew up with in the 80s or whatever, but and so yeah, so I've been working since, I would say I had started working on that album in 2009, and by the time he got here, you know, as soon as he showed what he had, what he was starting with, it was on. You know, I was already employed to certain songs that, you know, were not quite, and of course there were some that began once I was in the picture. So it's been that long.
So some of the songs were like, you would just submit it, you would maybe wait for him to do something, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then
Well,
others,
the initial, at the beginning, there were songs like Ain't That Easy, Sugar Daddy, Thousand Deaths, Really Love, that already had been started. And so, and maybe there would be like, you know, big spots, or like with the bridge on, what's it? Ain't That Easy. That's another one. You know, wasn't there. And so more often with those early songs, there was more of lyrical. Whereas when he started coming back from those famous the creation sessions that he does with Quest and Pino, that's when he came back with the Charade and with Another Life and Tutu Till It's Done. And that was a couple years into the game, but it was just like, and the Charade particularly, when he came back from the session with that, he was like, I finally did what we was talking about, because there was some stuff, I'm still not going to give it away, I'll wait till the right time, but what inspired it is really, really deep. And who and so it was this thing he was doing. I was like, yo, we should do something like that. I mean, I guess we shouldn't do exactly that, but we should do, that's beautiful. And so I guess he had done something with that in that session. He was like, I can't wait to see what you're gonna do with it. And so he gave me first step, like things like Tutu and Charade melodically. Like Tutu is almost like all me, like melodically, and then a bunch of lyrics, and he wrote lyrics on the second verse. But like Another Life is like a lot of my lyrics were more, you know, he did the melody, and then Charade there I had more melodic, whatever. So it was a combination of a lot of different types of working together. You know, whether at first it was via satellite, I was always on the road 85% of the year. And then it moved to, okay, in the studio, you know, going back and forth, or just chilling, you know, in another space, like just, you know, shooting stuff, talking about it. And so, yeah, that, and we hadn't, you know, we didn't finish these songs. These songs weren't finished. This album wasn't finished, and but the touring opportunity came up. So we started touring, even though, you know, we were finishing those songs on the road.
so Charade, I know you don't want to go too deep into it, but it is, to me, it's one of my favorite songs on the record, and it's also one of the tracks that has a really strong Prince vibe, and I think it's...
Oh, Jason, I'm so sorry. They're gonna time us out in 2 minutes.
Okay.
I'm gonna come back in if you want to come back in with me, please.
Yeah, let's... No,
okay, so I guess you know, we're gonna ride it out, keep going, and then maybe after your question, then I'll go out and come back in.
Gotcha. Okay, so I was just asking about Charade, and I was saying it's one of the most Princey kind of tracks, and I say that just because of the chord changes, but also there's a melancholy there. I hear How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. Some of the song, like maybe something like Pop Life. It's like Prince had this ability to create this sort of optimism and melancholy at the same time in music. And I feel that in that track. It's also one of the more political songs on the record. And so I do wonder a little bit, as much as you can talk about in terms of the genesis of that song, because I think of all the songs on the record, there's a lot of great stuff there, but that's a real standout in a very unusual way.
Okay, so that's a loaded question, and I can't wait to answer it. And So what I'm gonna do, somebody tell me, cause me nor Jason know. Do I wait till this time's out, or do I just go out now and come back in? Let me see if anybody answers me, because it's gonna cut me
I think
off
you can
anyway.
just go out and then you come
It's
back.
gonna cut me off. Okay, all right, and I'm coming back, and you're coming back too, Jason, and all y'all come back with us, because we're gonna talk about the charade. We're gonna talk about the writing of the charade. You know, all right. All right, and we're back. So when Jason comes back in, I'm going to answer his question about the charade. So when Dr. Jason King returns with us, we are going to be talking about writing the charade. Crawling through a systematic maze to demise. Strain of drowning, wading through the lights. Degradation so loud. All right, I was just singing them a little bit of this charade. So
Can we hear a little bit more, please?
yes, degradation so loud that they can't hear the sound of our cries. Do relegated to savages bound by the way of the deceivers. So, the charade and any impetus in all of that. I love talking about the charade actually, because this is one of like I would say our most beloved brain children. From top to bottom, from, like I said, when it was brought home to, dressing, putting clothes on him. So the charade. So what we wanted to talk about, definitely him, it's his, well, it turned into And the Vanguard, is something that I knew very well because I'm from Florida, and, just along with all the Spanish moss and all the beautiful things, it's still the South, 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 about the South as you can get. And more particularly Tallahassee, because that's like southern Georgia, whereas the rest of Florida is like like more of an international New York snowbird like community. Aside from people that really are from there, and so at that time, before any Trayvon, and Lord knows the list is so long and is still accruing to this day that I get them all mixed up. But at that time, that had happened, and something like that had finally gotten national attention. I can't tell you how many cases like that were already going on in Florida. And so when that happened, it was like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about how frustrating this is. Let's talk about how it's not people being hyper militant. It's that this type of thing, this level of oppression has been going on for centuries, and by a special design, because long time ago, at least one of them queens, I just can't remember her name, was doing trade just like everybody else, wearing all the gowns, doing all the things. Not that you had to wear that, but like, and then creating that thing called race, help corner the market, more or less. Trade, I feel like starting with that, and starting with, putting a stamp on a whole people, just to justify that you wanted to go and do this grave and evil stuff of using humans like they are, or worse, like animals, like just something to be a means to your end. Their life does not matter. And so here it is, still going on in many different ways, many different ways. And when we all probably agree that genetic imprinting and all these things exist, you see how upset that I am. And look, I'm biracial. My mama's black and my dad's white. I'm not even a whole 100%, and I can feel it reverberating all through my being, a need for justice. Because look, at the end of the day, you can't make up for all of the genocide / torture, because no one ever calls it that, But so here we are now. So that's the impetus. That whole feeling is how we came up with charade, and the intellectual all those beautiful words and things came from, like, you know, him saying stuff like, well, okay, I want to like say what James Baldwin would say, you know, kind of how he would say it too, but like through Dorothy Parker's voice, you know, or and it was like wonderful because it made my mind work in a way like that reminded me of school. It was like giving me a math problem or something. So, and then where he was like, and I want the melody like in like when I wrote the words like for the entry, he was like, I actually want to follow that thing I did because it's like it's an ascension, you know, the notes are going up, um and the how it was really a tag team because when I wrote the Jason when we first started, I wrote the whole thing. I wrote the whole thing based on and the original subject matter was not this. I'm sorry, before it became Name the Charade, before it came those words, his whole thing was like, at first he was like, I want to, how come you don't call, like, it wasn't that How Come You Don't Call Me, it was another song, but I can't remember it right now, but it had a much lesser, it was not one of the deeper ones. It was like the come in on I would really wish I could remember the original thing he wanted, but I wrote a whole song based on that because I just wrote fast and I got excited and I wrote it all. And then I showed it to him. He's like, that's nice. I like the melodies, you know, but I'm thinking I want to do it about something deeper and different because something came to me all at once, like not just the melody, not just the words, but that was all we wanted was a chance to talk. Said we only got outlined in chalk. And then I think I came up with that revealing at the end of the day, the charade. I don't know. I don't even remember because it was so like kind of it was like symbiotic back and forth. And then there would be times that we'd have to do the line together, like with the faith at the size of the seed. It like one little connector word wouldn't be working or the scansion was weird. And so it was a wonderful, intellectually and spiritually stimulating. Once we had this cause, it was like, oh my gosh, this is a war cry and a lament, you know, and, you know, yeah.
But it really captures the moment. It captures the beauty of that time, the kind of the feeling of relief that people were actually finally addressing these issues that needed to be addressed for such a long time, and yet the overwhelming tragedy of so many instances of this kind of violence that were happening. So it was like both things at the same time. And I think the song has a kind of, this like avant-garde beauty to it that almost like rubs up against the subject matter. It's like such an interesting thing. And you see that with Prince again, like he'll sing like Pop Life. It's like, it's like, it's very hard to get that balance, right? And to do protest music that has that quality to it. But I think you hit on it. But actually, until you just sang it, I have not even like heard the lyrics so specifically, except reading them on like genius.com, because the way it's recorded, it's difficult to parse the Angelos. Did I touch on something? Okay, tell me about the recording of it, because it's interesting too.
Well, you know, I think that, well, there's a lot of layers going on there, Jason. And, you know, I think with the hurriedness with which trying to get a piece of work out at such a critical time where it's needed. I mean, I was literally marching in that big, beautiful march, like hours before the charade was released. You know, I even had somebody from Creative Time marching alongside me, like showing me the promotion. Like, is this real? I'm like, oh, they let the cat out of the bag. Okay, no problem. And then, you know, not going to release party, but like, you know, sitting down and hanging out with D and like writing a new song, actually, which is that one Red Dress that he was threatening to release at some point, which I mean, not threatening, like, you know, getting us all excited for it. And now I don't even remember the question. Now, what were you saying, Jason?
So I was asking you about the, we're just talking about Charade and the release of it and that kind of
Yes,
thing.
the release and the recording. So I feel like really it probably would have been clearer under other circumstances.
I don't mind. I don't mind the
But
clarity. I think it's a texture. It's
and
interesting.
he's historically textural anyway. So I feel like on top of all of that and all that texture, and you have to, peer through the nectar to find the whatever until you get the lyric sheet. That's one thing that I also too kind of celebrate about him, because I'm like the antithesis of that. I tend to be enunciate quite a bit, like because I want you to hear the words sometimes, and even at the risk of not being able to smooth over everything. But yeah, that's what that's about. That's the
But you also,
actually
you're
charade. I'm sorry, the charade is, yes, there's probably like a mysterious, now that I think about that song, because we worked really hard vocally on it, now that I think about it, because that's when I was saying it on a lot. But like, yeah, I think it's just, like the murk of what, we wade through as a culture.
that totally makes sense. So I saw the show at the Apollo. That's what I wrote about for NPR, which is I think maybe how we connected. And it was an incredible show. I mean, it was just amazing. And it brought back a lot of stuff for me, which is why I kind of wrote the piece the way that I did. Talk to me briefly, to whatever extent you can, about the tour itself and just about being on the road. So the difference between making an album, which took a number of years to make, right? And then came together and is released and is marketed and all that stuff. And then you're already on the road before the album came out, yeah. But then things change when the album is out and people expect to hear the version that they heard on the album or whatever. So just tell me about the experience of being on the road, and also maybe compare contrast with being on the road with P-Funk, because it was also too.
That's great. As a matter of fact, oh, there was something I was thinking of.
Apollo,
Oh yes, oh yes. We were actually quite glad when the album came out. What was so great about that is, like, we weren't relegated anymore. We could do our show, because in Europe we were doing our show. Overseas we were doing our show. But when we toured with Mary J. Blige, we had to stick with the hits. We couldn't, bludgeon them over. There was even, I think, Simone Eccleston from Harlem Stage, like, I hope that's her last name, came up to me and was like, okay, look, I know y'all are hampered, but like, please, at some point, give us the show y'all want to give us, because I would, and so that was what was so glorious about this time once the album came out, is we were really able to be ourselves. And with that said, what I found about this band, in terms of, I'll go in and out of all the things you asked me, is that they're like a baby funkadelic. Like, we are wild. Like, they had to put us out of the dressing room when we performed at the BET 25th anniversary, like, because we had broke a table, was smoking, all things. And they're also the sensibility. It's like they're very, 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 they're all geniuses, but they are not wearing it on their sleeve or condescending. They're really cool and laid back. The Vanguard, the other thing is, at this point, this iteration of the Vanguard, we've gotten some pieces back into place. Chris Dave was back. Red Middleton had come back. I wish that RL would have been able to come back, but what we were dealing with at the time. And then we added sometimes strings, which they are awesome, and then the horns, with Keon and Kenneth. And I wish I could name all the string ladies, Maz, Emily, but everybody, y'all know I love you. And so at that point, it was the most perfect, like, I don't know, maybe it's just because we got years of trial and error. Maybe it was just because, we were locking, like, the way we locked, the way everyone played was so beautiful. Sometimes I had to remind myself I'm on stage. I can't get geeked or like, hey, I'm in this. I'm the one doing it. Even the way that the singers, like, there was a point that we had come to where we had become so symbiotic that we were covering each other's notes, like, as a reflex, like if someone was dropping, like someone. And so it's just, to this day, that is my most favorite band. Oh, and other things that were different. Whereas P-Funk, I had to come in it and find my way because they were not in their era of big rehearsal at this point in life. D was the opposite. Like, we rehearsed, but not in like a James Brown sense. just in a like, hey, you know, I mean, it's a laid back rehearsal, except for where it's all understood. It's like it requires self. Um, so anyways, yes. So it's my most favorite band to date. And if it was even possible, which I don't know that it would be, to have them plus D play with me at some point in time, just even for one night, like that would be a dream. Like it's just today, it's still to this day, it's the baddest band in the land as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's some people saying the same thing, and I echo that too. I mean, it was such an incredible show on so many levels. Um, and you know, the energy was largely male, and you know, I think you brought something different, and it would be interesting to see. Like, I know Prince went through his whole stage too, of like how think about how many women have challenged him and changed the way that he performed, from Wendy and Lisa all the way up
Oh
to
yeah.
Third Eye Girl. So it's interesting to think about what the energy is there, and how going forward it might continue to evolve and so on. Let me just jump quickly, and then we should probably wrap relatively soon because we could talk forever, I'm sure.
Yes,
But
we could. Yes, we could, Jason.
we could go on. We can do it again if people
I
want.
wish we could do a part two. Maybe we should do a part two.
Part two. Um, I think your album, the especially the 2016 self-titled debut, as I said at the beginning of this, is like it's a gem, and it's so underrated on so many levels. And it needs more attention because I think it's really a snapshot of a certain time, a certain sound, and all of that stuff. So just tell me about working with Kelvin Wooten. Tell me about that process. And the other aspect of that I want to deal with is I find that there's so many sophisticated textures and chord changes, and the bridges, like I said, there's some really interesting moves on it. So it's a real evolution for me from the previous record. So I just
Oh
wanted you
yes.
I want you to talk about that evolution and the
Mm-hmm.
kind of musical and stylistic sophistication and how you got
I
there.
absolutely will. And I realize I'm gonna have to plug me in because I wasn't prepared on that level, and then I'm gonna do that. I'll be
Uh-oh.
right back, everybody.
We get to look at your wall in the meantime, and I can go through comments. Whoever talked about Betty Wright singing
Okay, Miss
Love Is Really
Kendra
My Game.
Foster. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Kendra Foster. She is over here wilding on the live.
No
You know,
worries.
one day I'm going to be absolutely prepared. I guess I have been once or twice before in my life, y'all. So we're about to talk about
When I was singing Pillows. But I was going to say to you, Kendra, I was just going to say to the folks watching, somebody had mentioned Loving Is Really My Game, the Betty Wright version from her last album, which is incredible, even though it's like canned, I think, during it. But,
I haven't heard it.
oh, you should, it's incredible. But, you know, she passed, unfortunately, and
I just can't, Jason, I can't
she's not
even
going
do
to do
that.
she's alive. She didn't really get it fully. So, anyway, let's
Seemed
talk
like
about
she would live forever.
it. Glorious.
Oh, hmm. Okay.
Glorious.
Okay, here we go. Kelvin Wooten. So I met Kelvin when I was asked by like a big Tallahassee outfit to go sing on like one of the first time Joiner Morning Fantastic Voyage cruises. Which honestly, please, anybody who's out there that has capability, if we could create a young Black musical cruise, that is an amazing experience. That was the only thing. It's like they were a little older than us, you know. So it was so anyway, so from that point, I was like, that dude, I gotta work with him. Cause Kelvin was always the one wearing the weird stuff like me, but somehow his was accepted, you know. Playing like looking and playing like Stevie Wonder when I first walked into the rehearsal. And I was just like, this dude is different. Like this stuff he makes is like, and so basically, we, you know, hit it off immediately and we started working. And he is one of those people. He plays everything. At that time, he had replaced Amp Fiddler when we met in or not replaced, but you know, sub to whatever you want to call it, was there at that moment for Lucy Pearl, and he was working heavily with Raphael. And so through the course of us meeting and working together in that instance and just talking on the phone, talking about music, doing, you know, just talking. Once I finally started touring with George, you know, I would be able to stop by Raphael's studio and, you know, hang out and all that. But it wasn't until years after we met that I started driving from Tallahassee, Florida to Huntsville, Alabama, or fly sometimes, depend, to go work with him. Because one day we were like, all right, we have to lock down the time. If we don't, we won't. And so I started going out there, and he was just only supposed to do an EP, but we worked so well together. I mean, like, and our process is like a lot of times from scratch. Like there's the only one or two songs that like the track already existed was ironically Promise to Stay Here. And I was like, I want that. I want that. I want it. And he was like, oh, it's fine. You can have it. Anthony, because he was also working with Anthony Hamilton very deeply at the time, because I even got to FaceTime with him while, you know, I was working with Wooten. And so basically, like it would always be like, where do we want to go today? Do we want to go to Europe? Do we want to go to, what do we want to say? Like something with respect, like respect. I was actually in a relationship at the time, and I should have put him on blast when I'm on IG. But anyway, and I was upset, and I was in the shower getting ready to go to my session, and I was just thinking about all the stuff I didn't want to take and that I wanted. And I ran it off, and he was like, you know, today, because at that time, what was it, like 2007? So Katrina, it had already been a year or so since Katrina, but the effects, the after effects was just still very, very high. And it still was a tragedy as to how underserved or how, you know, so he was like, I want to talk about that. You know, let's talk about that. And I was, you know, okay, well, actually, I have something that will work for that. It's about a relationship, but it's kind of how, it's pretty much how you would feel about your government, your society, or whatever. So stuff like that, you know, stuff like starting, and it would be an exchange. Like he might start some chords, and I start hearing a melody, and he comes in with all these elements, and then while he's doing the elements he's heard, I'm writing the words. Then he comes up with another change, or I hear a melody that goes into a bridge. It was like that. So, and it's all I can call it is definitely magical. It's definitely like an ordained type of like co-writer, and everybody agrees like that our chemistry is crazy. He's look, I love people who go to outer space, you know, people who take me, you know, there's lots of great players, there's lots of, but it's like when you choose what you choose to play is the type of stuff that I fall in love with, the sounds you choose to, you know. But yeah, so that's Mr. Kelvin Wooten. He's an amazing dude. Another thing about Kelvin is he was like a CIS major or whatever, like computer. His father is literally a rocket scientist. He's an engineer at NASA. So this is the type of stuff that, you know, he's a genius. Kelvin Wooten is a genius, and we're going to get back together because he's got all these new drum kits and stuff that he's got online available to the people, and we got to use them.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, it's a funky record, and it's scientific, soulful, funky, deep. I mean, it's hot. So you also did a song 2017, like a one-off Dada, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so this is, I'm assuming, part of a new project that's in the works. So where are we with that, and when are we going to hear something?
Ah, la, 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 la. This is my favorite part, everybody. I hope anybody's even still here to hear it. Is that okay? So those were one-off singles, because at one time, everyone, I just want y'all to know also while I'm here, I'm going to start another series besides this one, and then that's probably going to be it for the moment, where it's going to be called Kenna's Vault. And I'm going to be playing stuff that's unreleased, and y'all let me know what y'all think about it. I'll look back, you know, I may not be able to do it in real time. And I'll talk stuff in between playing it for y'all. Because why? Because I have so much music. I have been writing incessantly. And when I got a publishing deal with Sony ATV in 2016, around that same time, I was introduced to the realm of like manufactural writing. You know, I'm an artist. I'm an artist who writes a lot. I'm not like a writer who does the writer thing. And that's a beautiful thing, you know. But there are some writers that have no desire to be in the front of the person singing their music. So anyway, so I was at first, I had so much music that I was like, you know what? the way the world is now, the way consumption is now, the way intention is, even to the artwork, is such that, you know, I guess I might have to start peeling these singles off like I'm in the strip club, you know. And and that's what I was in the process of doing when I released Dada, when I got with Raymond Angry and we formulated Goldfinger and the Butterfly, which was a whole own thing dedicated to music we created together. That's dope. So you will get more solid Goldfinger and Butterfly in the future. But and then I actually met with a couple people. I was trying to play a bunch of y'all, as everyone. I have to give a hat off to Jason because he has been consulting me in my approach to life, because
I don't know if I knew I was.
Uh-huh.
I didn't
I
know
know.
what
Don't tell anybody. I'm
Okay.
so sorry. He felt bad for me because I was so lost. And I just got lucky. And now I quote him with my students. So anyway, I do, and I tell them so. I tell them, and they're probably like, "Oh God," you know, like we've already heard it 1,000 times. But anyway, so I met with Elia Einhorn. And because there's a couple people, you, him, Kevin Clark, Kevito, from OK Player, now doing his own thing with several periodicals. And Elia was like, "Yeah, Kendra, all these are hits. They're all hits. But I want to," and that's what brought me to you when I did. But I want to hear them all live in the same place. And I was like, "But do anybody do that anymore?" You know, I'd finally acquiesced to not doing an album, and not just because of, you know, making money, but also because of the attention to my artwork. I don't want it to get lost on you if you're not consuming a whole album. So therefore, I was like, okay. He was like, "And press," just like he attaches to albums more so than say singles. And as an independent, that's really gonna be my best friend, right? So anyway, so I took it was very hard to choose, but I chose 15. It's going to be maybe 16 songs out of this big vault of stuff that I have. What's so frightening and scary for me, Jason, is that I've created so many things that would be so great now, or would have been great when I created them. I've shopped them, or I've pitched them, you know, for other people or for whatever, and for whatever reason, until now that we got Big John over there at Sony, I don't know, like I think stuff broke through, but I think there was so many other types of things going on that I don't know. Like I don't know. I was starting to even doubt what I was doing. I was like, that's not true, because everybody I played this for, friend or not, they feel a certain way about this. So I decided, and the album is going to be called Here, because here, the way I started feeling when I first left the Vanguard to go be me, you know, it was very hard. I was depressed. I did not want to leave them. I wanted to try to do both. But, you know, my manager at the time, Rashidi Hendricks, shout out to Rashidi, you know, he was like, "Look, Ken, you know, if you don't, you got to start sometime. You have to start, because we have to plan things. We have to put them in place, like, you know." And so initially I was just like a zombie. I was like a zombie to my purpose. I knew it was time to be Kendra Foster after hiding out with all these wonderful, amazing spirits and legends for all this time. But I couldn't feel it. I felt empty, or I felt, you know, lost without my boys. Because, you know, here's the thing. Yes, I was the only girl, but, you know, I was really blessed. If that never felt like a thing, you know, those are my brothers, and they lifted me up. They really make me feel like a queen, you know. And so anyway, it took me a while. It took me a couple years, but I'd had gotten this big deal, and I was doing this writing, and nothing was really coming out. And then around the summer of like maybe 2017, my manager scheduled me to go out to California, like for extra time besides a show I was doing for my girl Rocio Contreras. Shout out to Rocio. And I was so mad, because I was like, I can't afford to do this right now. You know, I don't want to stay an extra week in California. But then everybody, I mean, so many people were like wanted to get in the studio. My week was filled. I even had 2 sessions, and I was going for it. And that sunshine, I don't know if it was that sunshine, you know, moving around, but all of a sudden I woke up into myself. And I started feeling myself repopulating, and I started feeling happy. and excited and rich and powerful and abundant. And I have felt that way, and even liberated, because I, you know, had some messed up relationships in my life. And so I had detached, but that was also hard to recover from. And so what's so important to me about this album is it's not just the evolution of over my whole life to here, you know. It's also the fact that I have survived all the pitfalls that usually come along in a career in this industry. Did all the drugs in my 20s, had all the bad relationships in my 30s, and I survived. And I survived, and I'm here. You know, I repopulated myself after this period of thinking I knew myself, going through a thing, and then hitting this point where I was more depressed for the most money and the most acclaim and the most everything I'd had in my life. And then I made this return around, and I repopulated, and I'm here. And so the music that I've made as a result during this time is, I feel like, whether it's lyrically or just vibrationally, reflects that thing that I found that I want to share with everybody. And that's that power. Real power is abundance. Real power feels so good. You don't want to subjugate anyone. Real power feels so good. You want to share. And real power lets you know that even with everybody being a god, everybody being a superhero, it doesn't mean that we're not special, that we don't get to be special anymore, that there's no standout, this or that. It means that we're operating at such a fantabulous level that there's only more and more things that can spring forth. And so, you know, now I have this mission to, like, either have the soundtrack for that, like, meaning that the music that gets you going through it, or like stuff that literally says things like, you are the healing you've been looking for. You know, I mean, I have to say, like, you know, one of the songs, it's like, I'm gonna have to quote it, especially during this time, but sleep, and I would sing it, but you may not hear the words. Sleep, my love, and keep your magic safe and warm, and rested so you can be strong, strong enough to win your battles here and yon, and navigate the great beyond. Life is ever changing, that you can be sure, but you possess a constant cure. You are the healing you've been looking for. And there's another verse that's like, when you wake, the darkness creeps right in, you can't ignore, but you know what you're sent here for. And all the things you can do to overcome it, you know, that you have already. Because there's a lot of stuff that I've been doing, even because there was one final obstacle that I hadn't survived. I survived the drugs and the men and all that, but my last and final frontier was this lady right here. And she was the toughest customer of all, because the metaphysical seminars and the meditation, I got like 100 meditations saved and binaural beats on my YouTube, you know, practicing yoga. It's like all this stuff, like, but yeah, so I feel on a mission with that. I feel like this music is something about this album that is not just a portal for me. It's for anybody that was, I guess, checking for me, and just for anyone, you know, because it was something you said earlier, Jason, and, you know, maybe I'll lose fans for this, but I don't, that word fans, well, friends, is that, you know, I am a journeywoman, but I'm really ready to get up on top of the rooftop and, like, get in front of everybody and, like, and share this with everyone, and not bury all, be scary and bury all my talents in the backyard, now that I know how to interweave them in the same space in my way, you know. So now I'm going to add dance and immersion and visuals and all the stuff that I know how to create to what you show up to life. So we can go to a world together and be moved. And is it all, and I call what I do a multidimensional ministry, because it's not like your good old fashioned, like, ministry in the sense, I might curse, I might not even talk about anything deep all the time, but that's life. That's how we are. We're multidimensional. And so I will not be boxed. That's not going to ever happen. I can't do it. You know, I can package though. and I can prevent. And I can, as a part of my ministry slash even just desire to jack off before the world, you know, like any other artist, just to just spew all your expression all over everybody. Um, you know, it's like, yeah, it's so that's here. That's here. Has a lot of great. It's got a lot of great. I got multi producers. It's the first time I did multi producers like that. Like my last album had only like mainly Wooten and then one with Jermaine Holmes. Shout out to Jermaine. And so I have King Michael Coy, formerly known as King Karnov. I have Theory Music. I have Heavy Mellow, Cinematic, DJ Prince and Cyrus the Great. And I hope I'm not leaving anybody. Yeah, I think that's it. And maybe possibly Joseph Lineberg, if he'll let me add this song to the guy who did How Much a Dollar Cost with Kendrick, to my album. So yes, that's here. And I was so ready to do, I did my most elaborate show to date based on the album in February. Thank God, before we can't do it anymore. I'm glad I got one in. And I'm actually thinking about shaping some of this music from the album into a deeper visual like project that to create, especially for the Shed to maybe get in on the open call. And because I was like, wow, these songs, the stuff that I was doing, yes, it's from my album, but they're saying so much without being a musical. You know, they can maybe be a thing, you know, that really speaks to like what we're dealing with now, what we deal with in general, and me and my personal whatever, you know, take as a living being here and now. And that's all of that.
Yay. I mean, it sounds amazing, and I'm actually doing some work on like what I call the therapeutic Black public sphere, which is this whole idea of there's been so many works historically that have been about therapy and about forms of therapeutic care in Black music, but we haven't really talked about it in terms of that, in terms of the language. But increasingly, as we move more and more to a place where we understand how important self-care is, and we understand how important various forms of therapy are, we can kind of now go back and look at some of these records in the past that were doing some of that work. So I'm curious to maybe write about some of your stuff in that context. And
That's so great. Oh, I'm so honored. Like, oh my gosh, this is like an honor fest today. I'm just loving it.
So we should do this again. We should talk about all the like, because we were going to talk about influences in Bjork and the Edwin Hawkins singers and people like that. And so
oh my God, I know, because I'm
that's
so
a whole other conversation. But I just wondered if you want to. I just did an obituary for Little Richard actually, and that was a lot to come out. But I just
oh my gosh, yes.
say anything about like the influence of any of the like Betty Wright or Little Richard or any of these figures who a lot of people have passed away in the last couple of months, in particular due to coronavirus, but also other ailments and illnesses. It's been particularly difficult in the jazz community. A lot of Black musicians of a certain age have passed away because of the disproportionate number of people who have been affected by this who happen to be Black or Latino. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on this moment that we're in, the musicians we've lost, Little Richard, anything you want to add.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, such pillars, because I think when it comes to someone like Little Richard, like if you don't know, please go do your research. I couldn't like say anything in particular at the moment, but like it just, I mean, yikes. I mean, he influenced so many people that we love. We could just start with that. I mean, Prince, just start with that, you know. And then furthermore, Betty Wright, I mean, look, coming from Florida in the South, I mean, that's a staple. I'm honestly surprised I never really got to meet her. You know what I mean? Or not that I can remember, because Lord knows if it happened in my 20s, we already discussed that.
You would remember if you met the cleanup woman. You would.
I know, right? I mean, come on, and I know, and then now I know you're not gonna sing that song. But that was right. So, but also Andre Harrell. is the most easy to speak on because he shaped the soundtrack of my growing up. I mean, you name it. There goes another hashtag, you name it situation. And we wouldn't have had Your Mary Mary pick up, you know, maybe or whatever, like, you know, all the things. I mean, so, and I finally got to meet him, you know, once I, you know, Grammy winning and all that, and get to go shuffle around in the circles and whatnot. But like, yeah, it's just, you know, in general, I would say this time, I mean, no, we're not suffering the stuff that like we have no idea what it's like for bombs to be dropping outside, or like, you know, like the just the levels of hell that other people go through. And so we're very blessed in some regards. We can be inside, we can be sheltered. I mean, there's still many, many, many millions of us that are not in America alone. But like, it's talk about just one day, just not seeing it coming at all, for your whole life to be turned upside down. I mean, if nobody knew what the arts meant to life, they'll know now that we can't do anything. They'll know now that like, well, we're like we are the leaders of the modern world in terms of entertainment, and like modern, I would say, like entertainment more so than like modern art. You know, we run that. That's what we do. So it's very much a part of our lives. And so when you take away like all of the shows, I mean, from theater to music to even art, I mean, visual arts, and you take away, you know, the others, the sports, the engagements, the things of this nature, and oh my Lord, I mean, for us, I mean, even the biggest people that you respect, that you think are hella rich, that might be, their life is turned upside down, like, and so you know, and never mind everybody, but just speaking as a musician, how this turned my whole life upside down, you know. And so what I feel about it is like, on top of that, people's dying left, people I don't know, there's like masses and masses of people dying now, heroes now, young people, you know, that are heroes already this soon and early in life. It's just like, what in all the hells is going on, you know? So yeah, I don't like, how do I feel? I feel like, what, WTF? I have a general resting WTF in my heart, you know, like right now.
For sure. But I think you know, I've always thought of you as somebody who's so deeply empathic. Like, you have such a, like, true artists to me, the feeling just pours out of them. And sometimes they have serious shields up because they have to protect themselves from that kind of openness. But you have always struck me as somebody who's deeply, deeply open, as if you've got like tendrils all over you that we can see, that are like feeling the world. No, that's why I think you're the writer that you are, because you're so open to things that come through you and you're able to synthesize them so well. And so I can imagine this must be a challenging time for you in some ways because of that, and because the world is like in pain, but also because I mean, there's still shows happening online, but what we're missing now is congregation. People can't congregate, and they can't be convivial in a space together. And
it's not, when my girlfriend, one of my best girlfriends, was like, well, Kendra, you may have to get used to it. This is the way. But I was like, but then that changes even my desire to do it, because it's one thing to broadcast, I mean, that's cool. But like, part of what I do when I get in front of people is because they're in the room, they're there with, you know, we can feel. And it's the thing that also makes it scary. And but what I wanted to say about there was something you said that I really wanted to touch on, even if we're about to go. With the tendrils, with the yes, I really felt this, because in case anybody doesn't know, whenever I sit down to write, most often when I sit down to write or when I perform, I've already asked something. I'm taking on possession. And I know, because when I think of me, I'm like, there's no way I would have come up with that, you know. And then it comes through me like lightning. I almost move really fast. Anybody who's worked with me knows when it hits me, like, they can't keep up with it. And so, yes, I think as a result of allowing myself and to be a vessel, inviting so many spirits to come, and being extra sensitive. I can't help it. I love everybody. I know everybody in my neighborhood, wherever I live, you know, hey Sal, hey so-and-so, hey, you know, and I hug everybody almost that I encounter, that I have a swell exchange with, you know. So yes, that's why I'm only just doing a live now. It's like I wanted to, hell yeah, you want to capitalize on this, especially as an independent. I couldn't bring myself to, and I couldn't even pull it up to be super, like, to try to be superficial and buck it up enough to show it, because I didn't know what was gonna come out, you know. So I'd rather just go through the feelings, allow myself to do that, go through the depression that I'm sure we all went through, because it was stages of this, you know. And so yeah, like that's I'm totally I'm a little too sensitive, I think, sometimes, you know. But yeah, I take on possession. I don't take really much accountability for this, because I can feel it when it comes through me, you know. Yeah. So I felt it, guys. But I'm here.
You're definitely here. We should end. We should wrap. Thanks,
we
everybody.
should end. So Jason, but for real though, can we maybe like pick, I know graduation's coming up soon. I know you're saving lives and institutions at Clive and NYU. But can we set another date to finish the stuff that we didn't cover? Because I really would love to go, and if any of y'all want to hear, you know, I really would love to go into like influences and the tapestries of all of that. And I would love to, because I was kind of looking forward to it, but I always overtalk all my questions. So.
No, you did enough. So yeah, let's figure out a time and let's do it. I would love to talk more about some of those things.
Yay! Thank you so much, because I know you don't do the live.
I don't do the live, but maybe I'll do it more now. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, you look gorgeous on it.
Oh.
You look gorgeous on it, Jason. So everyone, just so you know, before we wrap, this is Dr. Jason King. Honestly, I could go on about him. I mean, journalist, curator, producer, founder of Clive Davis Institute, a co-founder, just endless things. But go look him up. And he got a group called Company Freak.
Company Freak.
Lord, see, I'm getting old, guys. And Dr. Jason King, or you'll find him as Jason King, or Jason King Says, as you can see here. But please, I'm so thankful. Jason, thank you so much. For real, like, thank you. This means beyond to me. Seriously, it means so much.
More than welcome, and let's talk more. We should talk more. So this is a great opportunity.
I love you, Jason. I love you. You're so wonderful.
And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Lola, I see you. See all the names. Really wonderful.
Yes, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I see all the names too, but I'll holler at you at another time. And we're going to do this again. So y'all tune in and just keep a lookout for any post about it, because we're going to pick up this conversation. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you. It's been a tremendous honor, and I'm completely humbled by this.
Honor is mine, Kendra.
All right, everyone. Y'all take care. Happy Mother's Day. Mwah.
Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.